So silicon carbide in China went from gold rush to silence. That usually tells you something. So the real question is, how distressed is the market? And what does it mean for the industry? Let us take one step back and start with the gold rush phase. Silicon carbide didn't become hot by accident. China's 14th five-year plan made this one thing very clear. This material was strategic. Now, combining this with the EV boom and power electronics, the stars was finally aligned. And now in the beginning of this year, 2026, China is finalizing the 15th five-year plan in March. You may not find the word silicon carbide directly written in summaries, but here's what is written. Now, according to the official recommendation released by the State Council website, translated, accelerating high-level self-reliance in science and technology is one of the main goals of economics and social development during the 15th five-year plan. That is the foundation. And here is a second key line from the same official document. Again translated, drive decisive breakthroughs in key core technologies across the entire chain in areas such as integrated circuits, industrial machine tools, high-end instruments, basic software, advanced materials. So it's worth noting that advanced materials is in the same list as integrated circuit, basically semiconductors. So here's the point. Let's connect the dots and read it carefully. Silicon carbide is a semiconductor material classified as advanced materials, a core enabler of EV power electronics, critical for fast charging, essentially for grid power level conversion. In other words, you cannot prioritize integrated circuits, advanced materials, new energy, and technological self-reliance, and then ignore wide bandgap semiconductor materials like silicon carbide. So the point being, the plan doesn't need to spell it out. The structure already implies it. Now, if you only looked at press releases, China had basically solved the silicon carbide. But commercially qualified, repeatable, customer-approved 8-inch wafers today? Not demos, not pilot lines, not we showed one wafer at a conference. The number of companies that can actually do this? Maybe a few. If you're extremely generous, maybe several, compared to the list of 26 announced supply we saw last time, which basically means most of players aren't really playing. And anyone who still cannot demonstrate internally 8-inch wafers at this point, not borrowed, not purchased, not creatively sourced, is on the verge of getting kicked out of this race. Now, at this point, someone usually says, okay, but Chinese wafers aren't that good, right? Well, it's much less true right now. In fact, many Western customers were surprised positively by what they saw coming out of China. Take Tanker Blue, for example. The company publicly stated that it surpassed some international peers in 8-inch development as early as 2022 and later moved into 12-inch. And not surprisingly, they even commented that Western analysts were being too conservative in assessing China's progress. The quality gap closed faster than expected, the wafer size gap closed faster than expected, and prices dropped even faster than both. Which leads to a big problem. 8-inch silicon carbide wafers are starting to feel normal, at least in China. Accessible, available, not special anymore. And you hear Chinese companies explain it in one word, 内卷. There's no perfect English translation, but in business terms, it means a system where competitors keep escalating effort and lowering prices, not to create more value, but simply to survive. So next time you hear that word in an industry, you know it's hectic and competitive. It's not healthy competition by any means. It's zero-sum overcompetition. Everyone runs faster, but nobody actually moves forward. As a result, weak companies don't explode. They suffocate. And consolidate doesn't begin dramatically, it begins quietly. Alright, returning to the original question. Is the Chinese silicon carbide market distressed? That depends on what you mean by distressed. Are we seeing bankruptcy headlines? No. Are companies announcing failure on big social media platforms? Also no. In contrast, what we're hearing on the ground are things like salary delays, unpaid suppliers, expansion plans that quietly stop getting mentioned, and suddenly a lot fewer job postings. In other words, in China, failure doesn't show up as a crisis, it shows up as silence. This isn't a collapse, it's a slow consolidation phase. Like you're practicing Tai Chi, probably lasting the next 2 to 3 years. And only companies with real customers, real volume and real cost control will make it through. And then you may wonder and ask me, if the market is consolidating, why does a company like SiC just announce another major funding round? According to recent reports, the company completed over 1 billion RMB in A+ financing following a much larger A round in 2023. The article states, translated into simple English, that the annual capacity of the company is 420,000 silicon carbide wafers. More specifically, it says that the Wuhan base is planned to produce 360,000 6-inch wafers per year. And then comes the headline numbers. The first batch yield reached 97%. Now that sounds impressive. But in silicon carbide, yield can mean many different things. Is it crystal yield, wafer yield, automotive grade yield, or what does it actually entail? The report doesn't specify that. And importantly, it says first batch. Now, that doesn't mean that the number is wrong. It means the number lacks technical context. So what does that actually tell us? Does it contradict consolidation? Or is the capital still there? It is just that the investment has become very selective. And if you look at the investors behind this round, they are largely regional state-backed industrial funds. Changjiang Chanye Jituan is widely known in China as a provincial-level industrial investment platform associated with Hubei province. So next time, when you encounter these four characters, Chanye Jituan, in the name of provincial-level group, it typically indicates a government-guided industrial capital platform. That does not mean they operate like ministries. It means they are policy-aligned industrial investment vehicles. That suggests something important. This may not be a signal that the overall market is healthy, but it may signal a certain platform are being reinforced as a regional champion. While weak players quietly fade, that is what consolidation looks like. Because if you've truly mastered silicon carbide manufacturing, your margins are not just surviving, they are healthy, at least in this given moment of time. And right now, that is the real dividing line. And this is where Western companies start feeling uncomfortable, because China doesn't need to beat the West. All it has to do is just push the price down, shorten learning cycles, and scale faster. Suddenly, wafer companies in US and Europe are stuck. Compete on price, margin disappears. Don't compete, relevant disappears. Which means the value is quietly moving downstream. Not in wafers, in systems, integration, and reliability. So the billion-dollar question is, what should Western companies actually do? Compete head-on with China on wafers? You can, but you probably shouldn't. Avoid China entirely? That's not a strategy, that's a slogan. The only realistic path is uncomfortable, and that's what I've learned. Learn from China's cost structure, source selectively, differentiate downstream where real demand exists. Being on the ground and in the industry, we see the cost structures, we see the learning cycles, and the strategic conclusions very clear. Survival is not enough. Differentiation is required. Downstream value matters. That is where durable margins exist. So let's end the story here. China's silicon carbide market is not collapsing. It's consolidating, and the consolidation will not happen overnight. Some companies will find their sweet spot internationally, and others will dominate regionally or domestically, and a handful will slowly disappear quietly. And besides that, China is already reshaping global pricing, whether anyone likes it or not. The real question isn't whether China wins. The real question is who understands where China wins and where it doesn't. Because that's where the next opportunity is hiding. And usually that is not where the press releases are.